Research Institute focused on bodily computing. What did you have in mind, and what have you done?
Well, I had rumblings, and I was thinking of doing that. I met this guy called Don Jones, who really kind of helped me form some ideas. But so I'm an invasive cardiologist that treats arrhythmias, sudden cardiac death, and other arrhythmias that occur in the presence of heart disease and without obvious heart disease. And I put in those devices and helped develop a device that prevents sudden death and treats a very common chronic disease in this country that's very expensive called heart failure. And those devices became networked in 2006, meaning you could suddenly not just have to see a patient to find out what their heart rate was doing. These patients with advanced heart disease, you could follow it on the internet. And I realized that I'd become this kind of doctor that spent 90% of her time doing 600 interventional procedures a year, would mash all my patients into a Thursday afternoon clinic that couldn't really be the type of doctor I wanted, or make any of the kind of sentinel observations that I needed to make across populations to move these devices and feel forward and move the needle on heart disease. So I thought, I need to be able to understand how to harness this ruthless efficiency of this network data to better serve my patients, to reach more people, and to be personally, kind of satisfied. So it's very organic. And then as we started to explore what it means to take data from your body computer, we realized that the implications were more profound than anything the internet has done. That you could actually, through looking at massive amounts of data and connecting patients to their own data, create an enormous movement in healthcare outcomes and in healthcare diagnosis. So the profundity of that sort of occurred to me, and then I started talking to people that you and others have introduced me to, and realized that this is something that's going to require many disciplines outside traditional medical science to enable. And that created this amazing opportunity to be creative and really have science meet medicine in a way that would actually improve mankind's status in the world. So all that really drives me from a very practical, what am I doing with my time every day? I've been doing this for 20 years. I have a lot of experience, but all my knowledge is kind of caught in East LA where I work, and what if I can reach more people and many people like me across areas of medicine.
So I know you reached out to the School of Medicine, obviously you're in it. You reached down to the School of Engineering, because that was important. You reached out to the School of Business, which happens to have a center for communications, which was important. But you reached out to a fourth entity, which was a surprising entity. And tell me a little bit about how you work with the School of Cinematic Arts.
Well, the USC School of Cinematic Arts is probably the best film school in the world that also is very technology-driven. They have an Institute for Creative Technologies. They work with the Defense Department in virtual and augmented reality, and they can really tell a story. And what's more emotional than your own healthcare narrative? My brother's actually a film producer and a graduate of that program, and I have many friends there, and I knew the dean. So how do you engage patients and educate them, and even engage and educate physicians on healthcare costs, outcomes, and really the experience of healthcare? You create this emotional narrative, and you meet patients where they live. You don't isolate healthcare from their life and make it kind of a shameful, difficult, arduous, paternalistic experience. You try to make it an integrated, engaging, and you play off the emotional aspect of it. You try to respect and create an environment where the patient actually is motivated and franchised, accepted, and hopeful. So the School of Cinematic Arts has been instrumental in helping us create those narratives and understand what we need to do, what products we need to create, or whether it's over mobile or really within a one-to-one clinic environment to enhance that healthcare experience.
So let's talk about some of the things you're working on. We both had a chance to meet a former chief medical officer of GE Healthcare, and who created a very inexpensive but very creative way of viewing cardiology and ECGs and so on. AliveCor. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you've observed working with AliveCor?
Yeah, well, one night I was searching YouTube and I found our friend Dr. Dave Elman, who's a Duke-trained cardiologist who's in Oklahoma, and he mentioned a prior career at GE, but he developed a very simple iPhone case that you could put on your iPhone, touch these electrodes, and get a real-time lead one regular EKG. And I was fascinated by that, and sort of bugged the heck out of him. He agreed to come to our conference, and he said, "How do you think I should use this? Is this something for you, just a doctor? Is this something that we should have some kind of other commercial consumer play?" And we said, "Well, let's, as you and I have discussed a lot in our conversations, what's the use case for some of this disruptive body-computer diagnostic technology?" So at our annual body computing conference, we gave out these cases to 50 people who were there. Only 15% were 50 of the participants who had iPhones. Only 15% were doctors. We had film people, media people, business people, students. And just said, take this home, transmit whenever you want. Dr. Saxon's doing this under a clinical trial. I'll look at these every night, and we'll see what happens. So that little study that I'm writing up now is really a fascinating journey.
You found a lot of unexpected things that the population was kind of randomly.
Yeah, first of all, it's very sticky. You know, this is the one thing that's with you all the time, right? You never leave your house without this. You forget your car keys before you forget it. So you go back home, right? So everybody who was in the study used it, 4 to 6 times a week through the 8 weeks of the study. The other thing that was humbling for me as a cardiologist who just deals with arrhythmias is we detected some pretty significant abnormalities in people who thought they were healthy. So the reason that's profound for me is that there are about 250,000 sudden cardiac deaths a year in this country, real tragedy. Sudden cardiac death is defined as death occurring within an hour of symptoms. So, everyone knows someone who died suddenly or has a story. It happens in athletes. It happens unexpectedly, and in full 30% of the time, we don't know the reason why somebody dies. So, for instance, we detected a pretty malignant arrhythmia in a guy who was previously healthy. If he hadn't had the case and recorded his arrhythmia and came to see me as a cardiologist because I subsequently saw him as a patient, he happened to live in Los Angeles, he's now my patient, I would say, hey, you're 35, you just had some palpitations, almost passed out, but it happened, you had coffee, you worked out. He actually had a pre-sudden death arrhythmia, and now he's on a completely different pathway. He would have just been another number, sudden cardiac death, don't know why he died. Maybe it's a genetic abnormality we've not yet identified. So that for me is pretty important.
Well, that's pretty serious stuff, but you're also working with BMW and cars.
Right. So how do you get this type of information out? How do you get people sort of addicted to wanting to know signals from their body computer and educated and informed and advocating for themselves and others? Well, it doesn't always have to be a medical play. What if you're driving your BMW and you spend a lot of money on this car and you're into the driving experience, you're a techie, even if you're driving from your law practice in downtown LA to West LA, wouldn't it be fun to understand what your heart rate is as you're taking corners and you've got this intelligent sensor-driven car to compare your own heart rate to a race car driver? And then the health can kind of just sit in the background, or maybe you key into your health channel, get your heart rate and blood pressure. So a partner company of ours, and a really exciting company, is Effort Technologies, that has very interesting wearable sensors, was asked by a steering wheel manufacturer in Europe to develop a prototype on the BMW steering wheel to record, to put their sensor in the steering wheel. So you just, in their smart fabric, which is the way they engineered it, you just touch this fabric, it records your heart rate, respiratory rate, some other things, and incorporates it on your screen, on your health channel, or your car fitness channel, or whatever it's ultimately going to look like. And then that just becomes part of your enhanced driving experience.
So maybe let's talk a little bit about the serious side of healthcare, kind of your electrophysiologic side of healthcare. We've been working with some of the big manufacturers that make cardiac implants, folks like Boston Scientific and others. You've been approached to solve some major issues there from these companies. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you learned in the study having to do with monitoring patients, and what problems you think wireless technologies can be used to solve some of these problems?
Sure. Well, the fascinating thing, there are about 3 or 4 million people just in this country with implanted devices, defibrillators, or pacemakers. And once they become wireless and you can communicate with them, you can suddenly make amazing observations across huge numbers of patients. The largest clinical trial for defibrillators had 4,000 patients in it. We now, within just one manufacturer, patients with implantable defibrillators have 200,000 patients transmitting data from their devices every day. That's profound. So we, Boston Scientific, partnered with myself. I chair this altitude study group and a number of other thought leaders in my area across the country, from Mayo Clinic and Penn and others in Duke. And we said, look, let's query this database and do really wireless research across these large populations. And what we found was that in this really high-risk population of heart failure patients that have these devices that have high mortality, if they're followed on the web, just that partnership, just knowing they're transmitting data every day, being able to push data to their physicians, if their devices are followed that way, versus slugging in to see me every 3 months and hoping to compress some kind of information in that pressurized 5-minute visit when they're naked, and I'm running around kind of rifle through their medical records, if that's a more relaxed, continuous relationship, those patients live longer. They actually live longer. And probably it's because they're engaged in their healthcare, number one. They're pushing data to us, so there's actionable stuff we're picking up early and continuously. And it's better. We know them better, they know us better. And guess what? It's efficient for me. It really reduces the cost of following these patients in our clinic by 1 full FTE just on our 600 patients. We could then use that high-end, high-cost nurse professional to do something else, like really interact with our patients in a more meaningful way. So those observations continue to happen, and it's growing. We can't believe the stuff we're finding out. These are people who've been doing this for 20 years. We're really learning new ways to design devices to make them more cost-effective, to make them serve patients better and manage their disease. It's cool stuff.
Well, speaking of naked, you didn't confine your research to patients. You went out and went after the USC football team.
We did. So these are the guys. And this is the USC, this is the core starters of the USC football team, our little football team, our Division I team that's taken an NCAA meeting. But we were, this is part of an NFL grant where we were very interested to learn, what places some of these young, talented athletes at risk for major cardiac issues. And if you were to use traditional cardiac screening for elite athletes or NFL players, you'd end up benching 30% of the NFL for reasons that you didn't need to, and that's a lot of talent sitting on the bench, and a lot of cardiac, right? So we got this NFL grant to monitor players during play. So this is a scrimmage game in the Coliseum of USC players, and you see all their mean heart rates there. Every player on the field and arranges their heart rates during gameplay. We're the first people to do this. But that's interesting, and that's during a tackle. You see that little noise there? That's the one player got tackled, and that's his heart rate during an actual tackle, the time of potentially ultimate stress for an elite athlete during a game. So we think this will create a safer playing field, but to really understand this and get this out across all professional sports and monetize it, you really have to use this data for something else. So we're very compelled to say to fans, how would you like to have some predictive analytics if you knew Tom Brady's heart rate? Be able to say if you make that third down conversion, if we start to collect this data, we can make those kind of predictions and provide those analytics for fans. We can also provide important analytics for trainers. Zephyr and other companies are working on that to train and prevent injury, a very expensive and horrible thing for a professional athlete. And then potentially the health just sits in the background. You don't have to monetize it, but you can use it for the greater good. But you've already made so much and created such an environment around just the statistics for fans or trainers for injury that you've created this ecosystem.
So there's become new apps.
Yeah, so one of the apps that we're interested in doing is our 700 athletes at USC, our 700 elite athletes come into this environment, and they've got a lot to handle. They've got NCAA rules, they've got to eat well, which they don't, hydrate, they've got to go to class, and so how do they manage the complexity of all this? And so we're developing an application that's health-directed for them, where they can kind of life log and track their diet and their fitness, but also kind of tells them where to be and meet some of their other needs. Again, bringing traditional medical wellness stuff to their needs in popular culture and hopefully entertaining them with this and putting a sensor on their iPhone. But also giving them some real practical examples. And the other thing that the athletic department challenged us with, which was really interesting, was they want to create new, real student athletes. These are students first, and they want to, raise the academic level of our athletes. So they want us to also let the students know if Maya Angelou's on campus, they can go here and read part of her book, so they can actually get some college experience out of this, because they are pretty busy young people. So we're attempting that.
Well, let's see an example here of moving towards commercialization.
When we first conceptualized E39, it was really important to us that we just have this one device.
And so we partnered with Zephyr Technologies because they make this for the U.S. Special Forces and people whose lives depend on the data that they're pulling out. So whether it's U.S. Special Forces in the field or the Chilean miners training to be extracted from the mine, these people's lives depend on it.
Me and Julio actually have a G competition. I'm at 3.9. There's a rumor going around that he hit 4.1. I didn't see it.
It's got to be accurate. It's got to be precise data. And so we're thrilled to have that level of precision in a product that now people can train with and understand exactly what's going on with their body when they're training.
So that's exciting. Those are NFL players. So this is a relationship between Zephyr Technologies and Under Armour that provides apparel to the NFL for the combine and such. And what they're doing is they're actually using the sensor data to enable scouts to make better decisions during the combine. They were there last year, they'll be there this year, in order to better assess their suitability for play. So it's not just the 4-yard dash, maybe it's your acceleration, you know, in the first 10 yards of the 40-yard dash to better select players, protect players, train players, and they're getting into other major professional sports as well. And this is a very powerful area because, again, there are many pathways to monetization of this data, but it also has a very important health play for the athlete and for others. The thing I also love about it is if you want to really extend wellness and health awareness throughout the country, what better way than to get this stuff on an iconic athlete? Now you're not just getting poor kids to buy shoes that Michael Jordan wears that they can't afford, but you're getting them to want to wear sensors on that playing field in East Texas or whatever it is to be like Mike, and then they're actually doing something good for themselves, and you're, again, moving this needle on health awareness and safety.
So when I first met you, we talked a lot about heart rate, and we didn't have the typical clinical conversation about heart rate. We talked about how heart rate could be instrumental in social media, and could be instrumental in gaming, could be instrumental in all kinds of areas outside of the traditional way clinicians would normally work with it. And that led to you thinking about jellyfish.
Wears a sensor. We developed this with a game company out of Vancouver called Ayogo, and you actually made that introduction for us. A group of guys, really do-gooder guys who have a number of very successful mobile apps and computer-based games, but wanted to get into health. So we said, okay, you know, how do we create a game around heart rate for kids who are very precocious and interested? We created iHeart Jellyfish, where you wear any sensor. You know, the sensor doesn't matter. Your heart rate goes to the iPhone, goes into the game, and your luminescence grows as a fish, depending on what your heart rate is. And as you modulate it, you win or score points in the game. So we're now studying how that impacts kids' awareness of heart rates. But I view this type of thing as sort of, you know, anybody who has children in their house knows is that they really control a lot of behavior in the household. So when I was a kid, you know, we got my mother to quit smoking because we started getting health awareness in the 70s that probably wasn't a good idea, and she became aware of that because of all the pressure. I think a lot of what happens around health in the home and awareness will happen with children who themselves get educated, know how to use this technology, aren't afraid of it, and then drive healthier behaviors. And so that's part of that, the goal there.
So as you've gotten familiar with kind of the game creation side, working with the school, you've actually turned off to the dark side here a little bit and started working with little vampires.
Yeah, so one of the challenges that we put out in the Center for Body Computing was to get people to just join competitions to create great game apps for sensors. And this is a really clever and elegant sensor that Egamatrix produces that was, I believe, the first medical sensor to get FDA approval that clicks into an iPhone instant glucometer. So you simply test your blood, stick it into that sensor, plug it into the iPhone, and it populates an app and goes everywhere. Well, one of the problems for particularly juvenile diabetics testing their blood sugar a lot is it's a pain and it's difficult, and they feel like it socially isolates them and that impairs their ability to be compliant with that. So one of our film students developed this game called Vampire Rancher, where the kid can actually create a blood farm. And it's almost kind of a Farmville concept. So we're franchising the blood. Blood is good. Kids are a little morbid anyway. There are characters like Susie Littlemore, and you have your character, you build this blood farm, and you can invite your non-diabetic friends by giving them blood from testing and grow this ecosystem that now the engineering school is building out the back end of that. So we look forward to Vampire Rancher and building on some of the vampire stuff that's going on in the popular culture, getting kids to embrace their healthcare.
So this is all what we generally refer to as the gamification of health. why don't you just talk a little bit more about just how important the whole social networking, gaming, game theory, and rewards are going to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me that I have treated patients for 25 years. I was an intern, 25 years ago, and it took me almost 25 years to realize I couldn't just sit there and tell them what to do. I did evolve over those years. I wouldn't scream it at them anymore. I wouldn't, I'd be okay, and I'd try, a little reverse psychology. But it was amazing to me that I didn't realize it can't be paternalistic. It's got to be a partnership. I've got to go to where they are, reward them, understand their needs in some way that's more continuous than these point visits. Because no matter how much they admire, respect, or want to do what I say, that's not enough day to day when you're struggling with stuff, or you're trying to educate them on the complexity of what they're dealing with their own family issues and all the stuff that goes into being sick on top of life. So if you can make it fun, if you can gamify it, if you can reward, and you can make them feel, and our studies have shown that even if I'm following the patient virtually, they still feel cared for by me. They really personify that experience. So I really don't have to be there. And then if I am there and it's not as enriched an experience as they would like to have with me that particular day, the other stuff still sticks, and they still feel cared for and they're compliant. Plus, the daughter in Vermont is connected. Everybody else who's making it work for this patient feels cared for as well. And that is just huge, because everyone who deals with this stuff knows what those dynamics are like. They're very tough. So that's, we're active in that. And then again, if you get games and you get all this stuff going within large populations of young people or diabetics or whatever, you're suddenly sitting on all this amazing research data. Then you can really make the new products that meet the needs of the patients. Then you're not just guessing that this is what patients need. You know they are, because they're telling you that's what they need. And then they're using your product and you're figuring it out.
Your USC privacy officer made you erase all those tattoos that your football players were rating, but you and I are now playing with body tattoos.
Right, so those BK guys, we had to take all their tattoos off because the NCAA doesn't allow you to market your athletes, and they were really identifying themselves around their tattoos. But this really interesting company, Epidermal Electronics Sensors MC10, is bringing it back. So again, this idea that you could wear something that would integrate with the rest of your life that was medical and would allow us to do. They're a very ambitious company that hopes to achieve all of these metrics through these epidermal sensors, which would just be amazing. I mean, imagine even going into a hospital and just getting your tattoo put on. Maybe it's got your kid's name on it, whatever. And suddenly you're not tethered to anything. And everybody knows, what you're doing, including me sitting at home. It's really exciting.
So I can actually be wearing my ECG sensor as a tattoo, as a pirate here.
You can, and you can put it on your kid before they go out at night and figure out what they're up to, pretty much, from these surrogates.
This is why it's obviously a lot of fun to work with Leslie and work with the clinical folks that are interested in these technologies. I told you earlier that we launched our Qualcomm fund, bringing a $100 million venture fund in to focus on investing in wireless health companies. You see a lot of these companies early on. Traditionally, the venture capital community is invested in biopharma, biotech, maybe health IT. How important is venture financing to you from what you see coming through USC?
I think it's huge, and I think people investing in these companies really need to realize that they have to help the companies understand how their technology is going to disrupt traditional medical systems. So if it's an in-hospital technology, they really have to help understand and do the use case scenarios in individual hospitals. How does this, even though it's an amazing breakthrough device, does it fit into the regular flow of the way the hospital works? Because if it doesn't, it's not going to work. Is it going to meet some fundamental need of the hospital? The hospital may not care if it's moving the needle on global healthcare. They want to know if they can, have less nurses around, because that's their big cost. So really trying to understand the disruptive nature of this and trying to integrate it into an existing system is a huge challenge. And I love the popular culture piece, because if there's a patient pool, if the consumer, the patient wants the stuff, that motivates the hospital, that motivates the doctors, that motivates everybody in the healthcare system. Trying to pick off each hospital or each individual patient set is a much bigger hill to climb.
I mentioned earlier the TuneNet platform that Qualcomm launched, and the opportunity to collect data from multiple kinds of sensors, bring it together into an analytics kind of platform where you can actually really figure out clinically what needs to be done next, advise the patient, advise the practitioner, maybe even come up with a health score, like a FICO score, and figure out whether you're improving or not. We actually have on the floor an example of a company with a product called Macaw that actually does this and actually comes up with a health score. Can you talk a little bit about your view as a clinician of what's going to change in medicine when multivariable analytics plays itself out in clinical care?
Well, that is the end of wireless health, because as I was walking the floor in hour 3 yesterday, not being able to find food and getting a little depressed, all of a sudden I got dark and I was looking at all these companies and I thought, God, we're creating wirelessly the fragmentation that already exists in medicine unless somebody mashes this stuff up. Because even if you're a triathlete and you have to go on one side for your Fitbit and another side for your diet, that doesn't work. And if we introduce now that wirelessly in healthcare, we're going to have the same problems that we have right now. So this is absolutely how it works and why that this is the enabler that will allow it to work, because I need to look at the entirety of my patient. They need to look at themselves. Who cares if I'm monitoring their implantable device if they don't know how that relates to their diabetes or their blood pressure measure or something else, or their drugs. So these mashups are integral to realizing the benefit of all this stuff.
Leslie, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining me today. We've got time for 1 or 2 quick questions, and thank everybody for joining us. But I'll turn to the audience and see if there's any questions. I know there's mics in the audience, so please go to the mic if you have a question.
Hello. I work for a large hospital, and a disconnect I see a lot in these talks is physicians, biomedical engineers, the hospital doesn't want to use something that's not FDA certified, but talking to a lot of the vendors that provide these devices, and so far none of these types of companies, but some of the more old style, I guess you could say, companies, they say we can't get through FDA certification with standard 802.11 cellular wireless. In fact, they even produce systems that take down our wireless networks. So how do we use these systems if they don't really interoperate in our hospital?
So we spend a lot of time working with companies on it, and frankly, it's just plain bad information that you can't get a product through the FDA that uses Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or cellular. There are plenty of products that are out there already FDA certified that are using those technologies. So a lot of it is actually getting through some bad myths. There are some issues having to do sometimes with interference, especially in a medical setting where you have lots of different radios. That's a little bit trickier, but it is absolutely solvable. Occasionally it requires a circumstance where a particular device can't be used in conjunction with other devices in very, very close proximity, but rarely is it much of a problem once the problem is really understood. Qualcomm works very, very closely with the FCC. This is really outside of the FDA, but we've gotten the FDA and the FCC working together to solve some of the rules and regulations having to do with interoperability, and there's actually more activity going to come onto this space. But it is absolutely untrue. You can get FDA approval, and most of what we showed up here today is either already FDA approved or in the pipeline right now to be FDA approved. So I'm very, very confident that we don't have a technology problem using wireless. We'll take one more question.
Hi, that was a fascinating session. Dr. Saxon, I have a question about the remote monitoring of the patients and how that fits with the current reimbursement system. Do you as a cardiologist, is there a way that you're getting paid for doing that remote monitoring?
Yeah. Again, when you pull it into the medical, when you're looking for a billing code, it's much more restrictive. So yeah, I can prescribe any number of these products. The LifePort thing is currently under 2 FDA reviews, as I understand it, but I can prescribe them, but they're limited. For 6 weeks, the patient can have this with a wireless patch or non-wireless patch and get monitored, and we can get paid for it. The majority of the reason doctors aren't motivated to prescribe many more of those is much of the profit, just the way the billing code is constructed, goes to the company and very little to the doctor or the hospital or clinic putting them on. That doesn't matter. We use those because they're important, but that market will never reach the kind of numbers of people you need to reach to make really meaningful diagnosis over large populations of patients. This stuff has to be out there in the popular culture. People have to be gaming on it, et cetera, to really improve cardiac diagnosis. Because many of these problems occur in asymptomatic people, and their first symptom is death or major heart attack. So you can't wait till they come to you. You have to get this stuff out there, at least in cardiac disease, and probably in glucose monitoring and many other things like cancer prevention.
We're seeing a lot of new business models offered here where there may be consumer pay model, there may be combinations with pharmaceutical drugs, and the pharmaceutical industry has an interest in getting the application in the market. or in some cases, we're actually seeing a Kindle-like model where the medical device is also where you order more product, more supplies, more drugs, or related products, like in the case of diabetes food products, sugar-free food products. And so the business model is actually starting moving away from the traditional business insurance reimbursement models in some of the cases that are seeing. Leslie, thank you so much for joining me today.